Here now the readings. It's not common that at this time a reading that's outside of the biblical canon is read, but on Confirmation Sunday, it's been my habit the last few years to share just a little word out of the historical works of Methodist founder John Wesley, for which this church is named. Wesley wrote an essay in his young career life, young adult life, about 1741. Wesley would have been about 38 years old, and the Methodist movement had just begun to gain traction, I guess, for lack of a better term, in the Church of England. And Wesley was asked to talk about what are the hallmarks of this movement. He never intended to form a new denomination. What he wanted to do was enliven the church in which he had grown up, the Church of England, to be responsive both in terms of nurturing people's spirit, helping them grow closer to God, and also kind of getting them outside themselves to serve others. In Wesley's view, the church had become kind of insular and not very welcoming of people of different socioeconomic groups, and he saw it as needing to kind of be kind of bold, get out there and do some things. That was sort of Wesley's way. But here, just for Confirmation Sunday, it seemed for all of us nice to kind of hear Wesley's words from 1741. The character of a Methodist. I'll just read you excerpts of it, just a few paragraphs. The distinguishing marks of a Methodist are not his opinions of any sort, his assenting to this or that scheme of religion, his embracing any particular set of notions, his espousing the judgment of one man over another, are all quite wide of the point. We believe Christ to be the eternal, supreme God, but as to all opinions which do not strike at the heart of Christianity, we think and let think. We do not desire to be distinguished by the use of any particular religious expressions. For us, the most obvious, easy, common words wherein our meaning can be conveyed, we prefer before any others, both on ordinary occasions and when we speak of the things of God. Our religion does not lie in the form of our apparel, in the posture of our bodies, in the covering of our heads, or abstaining from marriage or meats and drinks, which are all good if received in thanksgiving. What then is the mark? Who is a Methodist according to your own account? I answer, a Methodist is one who has the love of God shed abroad in his heart as the Spirit gives it unto him. One who loves God with all his heart, with all his soul, with all his mind, and with all his strength. God is the joy of his heart and the desire of his soul. By these marks we distinguish ourselves from the unbelieving world. But from any Christian of whatsoever denomination they may be, we earnestly do not desire to be distinguished at all, not from any who sincerely follow after what they know and have not yet attained. Do you love and serve God? It is enough. I give you the right hand of fellowship. And now, hear this word from the Scriptures, this from Isaiah. Two readings, one from Isaiah 6 and then from Isaiah 40. Hear this word. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon the throne, high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. Above him stood the seraphim, each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called to another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is filled with his glory. And the foundations of the threshold shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. And I said, Woe is me! For I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a burning coal, which he had taken with tongs from the altar, and he touched my mouth and said, Behold, this has touched your lips, your guilt is taken away, your sin is forgiven. And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And then I said, Here I am, send me. And then from the 40th chapter, hear this word. Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. God does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. God gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might, he increases strength. Even youths shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Let us pray. Grant, O Lord, that we might be the masters of ourselves to become the servants of others. Take our minds and think through them. Take our lips and speak through them. Take our hearts and set them on fire for Thee. Amen. Some years ago now, a story about a Bloomington man made the national news. The man's name was Don Calhoun, and in a lot of ways, he was a pretty ordinary person living a pretty ordinary life here in this community. He worked as a salesperson at what was then Office Max on Veterans Parkway, and people who knew him regarded him as a likable, decent, hardworking guy. But he made the national news when one day he took off work and he went up to attend a Chicago Bulls game at the Chicago Stadium where the games were played back then before the United Center was built. This was in the heyday of the Chicago Bulls. The Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan, Bill Cartwright, every game a sellout. They were at their apex as a club. And the story is that Don Calhoun went up to the game one day, and he got to the stadium. It so happened that he was wearing kind of shoes that stood out. They were bright yellow in color, and his shoes caught the eye of one of the Bulls' marketing people. As he was going through the turnstile, they noticed Don's bright yellow shoes, and they stopped him, and they said, "We'd like to pick you as the one fan who will do the halftime challenge at the game today." Well, the halftime challenge was this. Don would be brought out onto the court at the half, and he would be given one shot to make a basket. And this shot would have to be made from ultra long distance, not just half court, but full court, basically, under the opposing basket, if you can get a picture of this. They would put him under one basket, and he could take just a couple of steps, and he'd have to launch the ball. It would have to go the entire length of 80 feet, basically, and he would get no practice shots, one attempt. But if he made it, he would make $1 million. Well, of course, Don said, "Sure, you bet. Sign me up. I'll try it." And at the half, sure enough, he was ushered out. He stood near a basket on the court and looking at the opposing goal far away. And he was just about ready to shoot the ball. He was going to do this, like you normally would in the conventional two-handed way, when a voice called to him. It was not the voice of God. It was not a divine messenger. It was the voice of a Bulls cheerleader who happened to be standing nearby, and she called out to him right at the last possible moment. She said, "Hey, don't shoot it like that. You're going to have to do it differently if you're going to make it this far. Nobody can do it two-handed like that. You're going to have to throw it like a baseball. Don't do it the conventional way or you don't have a chance." And Don took the advice. He wound up and he let her go. And just for fun, I did an internet search to see if by any chance there was video of what happened next. And lo and behold, still up on YouTube, here is Don Calhoun from Bloomington making $1 million in 4 seconds. Wow. Boom. It was so unlikely that there was some worry after this happened that the insurance company who had written the policy for this, some of you know about all this stuff, it was a little company. They specialized in kind of hole-in-one insurance and this kind of unique insurance. There was worry that they didn't have the money to pay up. But lo and behold, after some wrangling, they did have it. And Don's life, substantially different after that 4 seconds and that long shot. He was quoted in the paper as saying, "Hearing that voice at the moment I needed it made all the difference. I am so glad I listened to that voice." And the story came to mind in anticipation of Confirmation Sunday, for the simple fact that for centuries now, the church has taught that being a person of faith, when you boil it all down, is really about living with your life attuned to a particular voice, not a cheerleader's voice. I'll concede it's a very different voice, but it's a voice that calls you, in a way, sort of like the cheerleader, and it says, you can't do it conventionally if you're going to do it the way to reach the goal of being a great soul. You can't do it the way everybody else tends to do it. There's a different way. There's a different process for you as opposed to the masses that are all around you. If you want to be a great soul, you got to be at least a little bit unconventional in your approach. And that's what this sermon is about today. Obviously, it's mostly for you guys, I know, but I hope you'll all listen in, because my contention is that whether you have been a member of this church for 1 day or 80 years, the truth is that when we take our membership vows, we promise that we are going to listen regularly for the voice of God. That's going to be a central goal of life, is every day giving priority to the voice of God rather than all the other voices that clamor for our attention. The voices that say, live for prosperity, live for success. The voice that says the way to be victorious in life is to see your days as a big competition. You clamor over your peers and live for yourself. And that's what it means to be a success. There are all kinds of voices, you have to concede, that clamor for our attention and our loyalty these days. But to join the church is to say that in place of those voices, we will listen to the voice of God. We will listen earnestly for that voice which says, like the Bulls cheerleader, try another way. Whoever would save his life will lose it. Whoever loses life for my sake will find it. I want to think about discerning God's call and responding to it, because I think it's a live issue, not just when we're confirmed, it's all of us called to do that every day. And I didn't know any clearer Bible story to help get at this than the day God spoke to Isaiah in Isaiah chapter 6. And in fact, the more I thought about it this week, the more clear it became to me that Isaiah's calling and the process Isaiah went through, both in hearing that voice and in making a response to it, actually, it's a pretty nice template. It's almost like a little scaffolding for our own understanding of where God speaks and what we might do to help clarify it and respond. There's clear movement in that little few verses in Isaiah 6 as far as where Isaiah has his attention focused. And I think it translates pretty well. It correlates to what's possible for any of us. In the year that King Uzziah died, Isaiah writes, I saw the Lord sitting high and lifted up. I saw the winged cherubim in all their splendor, 2 at his head, 2 at his side, 2 at his feet, with which he flew. And the foundations of the threshold shook. And I said to myself, woe is me, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. But I heard a voice saying, see, I have cleansed your lips and will deliver you. And again a voice said unto me, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, here I am, send me. The first thing that I notice about this is that when Isaiah hears God speaking, his first natural impulse is to kind of look up with a sense of wonder and awe. He kind of gets in touch with just how mysterious and grand life really is. And we get a hint early on that the everyday experience for Isaiah might not have been all that good right then. They were in a time of loss. Uzziah, the great king, had died. It's thought by scholars that Isaiah lived in the king's court. He knew the king and probably was well regarded by him. So this actually, his everyday life, is kind of normal or maybe subnormal in a time of grief. But the first movement in hearing the voice of God involves for Isaiah a kind of moment of awe and the realization that no day is so ordinary where something special and amazing and mysterious and wonderful can't happen. In the year King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting high, and his vision was raised. One of the things I love about this church is that linear architecture to it, that kind of, when you come in here, you just kind of lift up your eyes, don't you? It's made that way. Isaiah lifts up his eyes and takes a moment to know that there is wonder in the presence even of an ordinary day. It was Thoreau, I think, who said, "The world will never starve for want of wonder, but only for want of wonder." And not for want of wonders, but for want of wonder. And I think the first clue Isaiah has is that it's God and not some lesser voice, is to look up and to notice how much there is in even the everyday to celebrate and to revere, and how religion for Isaiah, rather than making things cut and dried and ordinary and settled and sure, was about helping him come alive to the wonder of every day. You know, great souls have that capacity to see every day as precious and that there's something to be learned from it. Years ago, when I was in another church, there was a man in my congregation named Wendell who, at the age of 84, enrolled in a community college to start the process of getting an associate's degree. He made the news. Oldest student. He called it the University of Kankakee. It was Kankakee Community College. I'm the oldest student at the University of Kankakee. And he took 4 years, and lo and behold, got his associate's degree at the age of 86 in a music program. And the good-natured fellow, he said, "You know, when I started this, I could not play a thing on the piano, and when I finished, I could play 2 songs. One was Whispering Hope, and one was not." That's the way he played. But to ask him about that, he said, "I wanted to learn to play even though I'm old as the hills, because life is so wonderful. I didn't just want to sit on the porch and let it pass me by." So, wonder is the first piece of Isaiah's call. He looks up and he sees this. He doesn't even understand it, these winged beings, which is the Bible's poetic way of talking about the splendor of God and the mystery of it all. He avoided the trap, Isaiah did, of thinking that faith is about making everything predictable and conventional and certain. And instead, he saw it as an avenue for understanding how beautiful it is. Those folks who get to go out in the world of nature and say, "Isn't my life splendid?" There's a faith quality to that. And Isaiah looked up, and when he did, we read that his being in the presence of the divine greatness led him naturally to a second direction to cast his eyes. He kind of looks in. I would call it a moment of introspection. "I saw the Lord sitting high and lifted up, and then I said, 'Oh, woe is me, for I'm a man of unclean lips, and I dwell amidst the people of unclean lips.'" For Isaiah, being in the greatness of God evoked not only a sense of wonder, but this kind of beautiful sense of humility. I see how great God is, and in contrast, I know I don't measure up. For Isaiah, it was humility that was the natural response to that. He acknowledges his faults, how far the distance is between he and God. And I think healthy religion always has that dimension, doesn't it? The humility. The recognition that we come to faith as flawed people. We don't know all that we need to know or can know, and we need to be people who treat others kindly because we need to be treated kindly. We need to be more ready to forgive than to judge, more ready to affirm than to condemn, just like we need affirmation and forgiveness. It's worth noticing how quickly God runs to Isaiah's side when he's humble and lifts him up. The coal is placed to his lips, and the word of grace given. "I have touched your lips. Your sin is removed." Humility is the beginning point of that exchange, being faithful or making a faith commitment to a church is not a point of arrival, saying, now I'm spiritually mature, I know all that, I'm elevated over other people who haven't made this commitment. Rather, it's to know that the faith we confess today with all our heart needs to be regained tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, every day, every new day. We're called to humbly approach it with the idea that faith will be a decision. And we all get off the track at various points, and we need grace, and we need the redirection of God to go on. And when we look for it, we'll get it. Isaiah looked up, and then he looked inward in humility, and he acknowledged his limitations. And God came alongside. See, I have put my words in your mouth. Your sin is forgiven you. And at that moment, grace happens. And he knows a dignity that wasn't an achievement, but rather it was a gift that then allowed him to be himself. And it's only then, it strikes me, that when he gets a sense of confidence that he's loved not for what he's achieved, but for just who he is as a child of God, that then one more step happens. And he looks up, he looks inward, and then he's invited to look out. Then I heard the voice of God saying, whom shall I send? Who will go for me? And I said, here I am. Send me. And I think that's the last key piece in this little story of movement. What a call from God sounds like. It sounds like go. Get outside yourself. Go make a difference in somebody's life. It's not enough just to have a personal relationship that's only just you and God and nobody else. Whom shall I send? Who will go for me to share this love with others? And I said, how about me? One of my favorite theologians, William Sloane Hoffman, the great preacher of the last century, once wrote, there is no smaller package in all the world than a person wrapped up only in themselves. Isn't that a great quote? No smaller package than a person wrapped up only in themselves. And obviously the meaning of that is that there has to be a willingness to get outside yourself if your faith is going to reflect the life of Jesus. One of John Wesley's favorite sayings, I know you all learned it this year in confirmation, and it's worth repeating for all of us, and many of you know it too. Wesley taught the early societies, do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, as long as ever you can. And it's interesting to note, the repeating phrase there, of course, are those words, you can, you have the capacity to make a difference. It's built right into our DNA as a church. Faith is trust plus action. That's what our confirmands learn. It has to be translated into caring. It was true of Isaiah. Isaiah recognized it, and so he went. And we're called, too, to do the same thing, to give the gifts that we have, however many or few they might be, to make a difference. And one thing we can be sure of, in our life with God, the time will come when the ball is in our hands and it's our turn to make the shot. And the voice will come and say, don't do it the conventional way. Don't do it the way the rest of the world does. Look up and look within yourself and then look out and see where you can make a difference and give back a gift of love as God has first given it to you. Isaiah did it. Isaiah did it. And it didn't always go easy for him, by the way. He fell flat more than once, but he went on to learn that when he fell flat, and the shot was errant and missed the mark, God was there to pick him back up. Just a few chapters later, those who wait upon the Lord, even the young men who fall, find themselves exhausted. It's not over. The game's not over. Those who wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. They'll mount up with wings like eagles. They'll run and not be weary. They'll walk and not faint. So, I have good news for you. You can go out and live with that assurance. God wants you to fly to great heights in the years ahead. But he also wants you to know that when you fall, it's not the end. God's voice is persistent. That's the good news. And the arm of God is strong, always there to pick you back up. So, look up, look in, look out. Whom shall I send? Who will go? We're so grateful for your response today. Here we are. Send us. And we, as we celebrate your commitment, we'll recommit ourselves to go along with you, to give our lives to the one in whose service we're strong and free indeed. Amen.